Are you living your life or managing other people's expectations? Silence can become one of the loudest thing in a room, not because it clearly says something, but because our mind rushes to decide what it means. Welcome back to Lead Within. I'm your host, Naila Qureshi, executive and relationship coach. The idea for today's episode came from a recent conversation on a podcast. During my conversation with the hosts, I learned that my silence had been taken as judgment. That genuinely caught my eyes and my attention that I was not judging anyone. To me, I was just listening, observing, and giving the conversation space. But for someone else, my silence appeared to be something completely different. That moment stayed with me because I realized how easily silence becomes a blank space that we fill with our own assumptions. And I have experienced this from the other side, being on the other side where I'm the one who is filling in the gaps or filling in the blanks. Since I began showing up more publicly through coaching work, through podcasts, through live streaming, and even for love for fashion, I have noticed that some people can be very encouraging in private but remain completely quiet in public. And some people who are extremely encouraging in public, but when they come in front of me, they are totally silent. And when I'm not careful, I can begin giving that silence a meaning. Maybe they don't approve, maybe I'm sharing too much, or maybe I'm trying too hard. But the truth is, I don't know that. This silence is real. The meaning I attach to it may not be. That distinction matters because once we treat an assumption as fact, it begins influencing our choices. So imagine a picture we loved suddenly feels like too much, or a caption that felt honest starts sounding embarrassing. An achievement becomes something we downplay, or we stay quiet in meeting even when we have something valuable to contribute. Sometimes we stop wearing something we love because we imagine someone saying that is inappropriate for our age. And we often soften our confidence before anyone has even called it arrogant. At that point, we are no longer simply considering other people. We are allowing an imagined audience to edit us. And that is where this conversation becomes bigger than social media. There is nothing wrong with thinking about privacy, relationships, context, or the impact of our choices. That is part of being thoughtful. But considering other people is very different from allowing assumptions about them to make our decisions. So choosing privacy is intentional. That is privacy. Hiding because we are afraid of judgment is different. I'll also do a podcast about the difference between privacy and secrecy. That's a totally different topic. But let's come back to here. So this is two different things. Sharing something because it reflects our value is intentional. Sharing only because we are afraid of becoming invisible is different. The action may look exactly the same from the outside. What changes is the intention behind it. So when I notice myself reacting to someone's silence, I now try to separate three things: the fact, the story, and the choice. So the fact might look like that they did not comment or replied, or they are very quiet during conversation. But story is they're judging me, I'm too much. It is not approved by them. When I separate facts from story, I can return to the choice. I can decide whether a conversation is needed for clarity, so I can protect something that feels private, or I can continue showing up because what I'm doing still reflects my values and purpose. The goal is not to ignore other people's reaction, and it is not to force ourselves to post, speak, or share everything. The goal is to stop giving unverified assumptions more authority than they deserve. My silence was misunderstood, and I have also misunderstood the silence of others. That is the humility in this conversation. Any of us can fill in the blanks too quickly. That we call it jumping into conclusion in cognitive distortion. Self-leadership begins when we slow down long enough to recognize the difference between what happened and the meaning we added to it. So here is your lead within reflection for this week. Where in your life might an assumption about someone else's silence be influencing a choice that should still belong to you? Sit with that. Reflect on it. Because sometimes the greatest freedom comes not from changing what other people think, but from no longer allowing an interpretation to control how we live. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for spending this much time with me. Until next time, lead better, connect better, and live better. Thank you so much. Take care.